Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and as much as our schedules allow, I am joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to dish up some movie news and talk about films either current or classic. And this week is no exception to that rule, unless you take into account that we're reviewing not one, but two current films. We're going to be talking all things Incredibles 2 and Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom. I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally said Jurassic Park, but the official title is Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom. But of course, in order to do all this fun, excellent, awesome discussion that's going to be happening, I need to introduce to you two guys I literally can't do the show without. Jim Pugliafico, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm good, and thanks, and welcome to the show, everybody. It's good to be back after kind of a week hiatus, which is why we have two movies this week, hopefully making it up to people who've been waiting. Hopefully people who are listening have seen at least one of these two movies.
I'm pretty sure that's a pretty safe bet. And yeah, we did take a week off due to traveling and work stuff and all kinds of craziness that sometimes happens. But it is good to be back. Speaking of being back, Will Lindis is back too. Welcome, Will. Hey.
Hey there, guys. Hey, Brad, Jim, listeners. Yeah, really glad to be back. You know, it's like you kind of realize, or I guess you don't realize how much what we do is sort of like an integral part of our week until we take a week off from it, and you're just sort of like, where's my movie discussion? Where's that been? So I'm glad we're back so that we can dive back in.
You have to remember a movie for more than a week.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The one that I saw the furthest back, there could be like, oh yeah, and then I think
what happened in that movie again?
I think it was, yeah. So bear with us on any gaps in memory. These aren't ones that we saw yesterday.
You've got to find a way to hold them in your memory as much as possible, I suppose. But hey, also want to give a shout out. Looks like we've got a few folks who've already joined the live stream. A big hearty hello to Sam here in Tucson. Hey, Sam, glad to have you with us, as well as Steve Sosa. Welcome, Steve. Glad to have you here too. Folks, as you're joining, if you have thoughts on either of the films we're going to be talking about this week, feel free to drop them into that live chat. We'd love to hear your comments. Also, we're going to be talking about some reported news that the Star Wars standalone films have been put on hold. So we're going to have some interesting discussion and commentary around that here in just a few minutes. But we'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. So definitely take advantage of that live chat. Sometimes it moves pretty quick. We don't always get to read everything. But assuming your comments are, safe for YouTube, we may read some of them on air. And looks like we've got Darren joining us as well. Hey, Darren, good to see you here. So, guys, there is a shit ton to talk about this week. Are we ready to dive into a little bit of Star Wars standalone movie discussion?
It wouldn't be movie news if it wasn't Star Wars or superheroes. So, yeah, let's go.
It must be summer.
Oh, goodness, indeed. Well, last week, news broke that the Star Wars standalone films, a la Rogue One and, of course, Solo, A Star Wars Story, were being put on hold. That these future standalone movies, reportedly one involving a younger Obi-Wan Kenobi, another potentially featuring Boba Fett. These two films were, even if they were indeed happening at some point, potentially being put on hold due to mixed reactions and poor performance by Solo, A Star Wars Story. Since that news broke, ABC News, which is owned by Disney, is now reporting that rumors of those standalone stories being put on hold are, according to Lucasfilm and Disney, inaccurate and premature. Lucasfilm told ABC News there are still multiple Star Wars films currently in development that haven't been officially announced. And apparently these are films outside of the new Star Wars trilogy being helmed by Rian Johnson, director of The Last Jedi, as well as I guess there's a new series of films coming out being helmed by Game of Thrones producers David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. So these movies are possibly maybe not on hold.
It's called Game of Stars.
Game of Stars. Nice. I mean, what do you guys think of this? Like off, on, like, are you skeptical of this news? Does this news make you sad? Does it make you happy? Like, where do you guys come in?
To me, I take most of this stuff with a grain of salt anyway, because these days you never know what's fake news, what's real news, right? And that applies to, in everything from, hardcore politics and world events to movie news. And so when I heard the news, I'm like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. I actually assumed that it was like, they're not going to just like chop them off and, it felt like a knee-jerk reaction if the reaction was to totally just kind of get rid of these movies and, put them in the trash bin and not think of them again. Because I'm sure there's been some development on those films. So they had a misstep with Solo, right? A Star Wars story in terms of its kind of lukewarm, I guess, reception, we could say. It wasn't obviously. I think all of us, liked it at least a little bit, and didn't think it was a terrible movie. I didn't think it was a franchise killer kind of movie, and so yeah, it seems like what they've done, and we'll get into the news a little bit more, is kind of take a step back and rethink how they're going to produce, position, and kind of market whatever films are coming up, whether it's the Rian Johnson films, the Weiss and Benioff films, or maybe they will reconsider and move forward every once in a while with a standalone story. I mean, it's who knows? I mean, it's wide open. I never really cared much about Boba Fett, so that one never had me excited at all. The Obi-Wan story had me excited. And then they were also, by the way, talking about possibly kind of a Lando Calrissian story. And that was even rumored as a standalone. So we'll see what happens. I'm not sad. I think it's a good, smart idea to step back and say, oops, that one didn't feel quite right. Let's see what we can do to position the next one to be better and have more of an impact.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way that this news rolled out, to me, speaks a lot to sort of a lack of confidence in their own decision-making process. And I think that's the big takeaway I got from all of this. If it was just a matter of, hey, these last ones did not do what we wanted them to do, so we're going to put them on hold and come back to them later, or stop doing these for a bit while we focus on our main trilogy or main part of the line, like that would be one thing. But to have different parts or different families of that company sort of saying, yes, it is, no, it isn't, no, it isn't, yes, it is. One way or the other, they've got to fix their messaging, because I think that fans are generally pretty forgiving of a lot of things, but I think the more shakiness there is in a property, the more likely someone is to start filling in the gaps. And you don't fill in the gaps positively. You fill in the gaps with the negative stuff, like, oh, it's probably because of this, and it's probably because of that.
These days, yeah.
Well, and any days, like I think that's human nature, right? Like if you hear like part of a story, like you're gonna fill in the gaps, and you're always gonna assume someone's omitting, like, they're not omitting the best parts. They're omitting the stuff that's like, oh yeah, this is the stuff that we want to gloss over. And that's human nature. But so in terms of these actual films, in terms of like how they affect me, I didn't really like Rogue One, and I didn't really like Solo. So I guess for me personally, like, it doesn't hurt my feelings that they're taking a break from these. I feel like I almost got the feeling like there was too much of a rush to get on this like 1-a-year schedule that they sacrificed quality on these interstitial films. Whereas if instead they had stuck to whatever their formula is for their main trilogy and then put these out when they were ready on whatever schedule that is, I think they could have shored up a lot of the script and casting and et cetera issues from those last 2 films. Maybe that's what they'll come back to. Maybe they'll say, maybe they'll say we don't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We still have people seem to like Lando. Maybe we can do something with Lando. They could still do those things, but I think it's wise to step back and get off of this. Like, we have to do one of these a year. Star Wars is popular, guys. People love Star Wars. We're not going to forget about Star Wars if we don't see a Star Wars movie this year.
Yeah. And Brad, I want to hear what you think about it before, and I'm going to get some comments maybe we can get to in a little bit.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you guys. I'm already feeling the Star Wars movie fatigue. So it's not exactly sad news to me that maybe putting these on hold is being considered. I mean, I liked Rogue One. Okay. I liked Solo enough. I mean, it was fun. It was a neat little romp. I think I liked it the most out of the 3 of us. But I mean, I got to tell you, like, I'm looking forward to this current trilogy fucking ending. And I'm not looking forward to a Rian Johnson trilogy. As much as I love Weiss and Benioff and all they've done with Game of Thrones, I'm like, really? Another potential trilogy of movies? Like, if you take Rian Johnson's new 3, if you take the Weiss and Benioff reportedly new 3 films, that's 6 more coming. Add in a Obi-Wan film and a Boba Fett film and Episode 9, that's another 3. That's 9 fucking Star Wars movies over the course of however many next years. And I just, like, when I think of 9 more movies in my head, I feel done. Like, I just don't even want more Star Wars. And I'm wearing a Star Wars shirt right now, so that should tell you something, at least for me personally, when I don't know. I'm okay if they stop.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, 9 is... So what do we have right now? We've had 10 Star Wars movies come out so far. So in the entire history of Star Wars, the number of films that have come out is the same number as are slated to come out. That's sort of boggling when you think about that. It's just like we're going to double the number of Star Wars in the next phase or the next cycle or the next whatever it is. That's a lot. I think that, I mean, for me, if I were the guy in the chair, and I'm obviously not, but I would have...
You're a guy in a chair.
I am a guy in a chair. And trust me, the internet has plenty of guys like me in chairs like these with opinions like these. But I think focusing on, if you're going to do a trilogy, focus on one trilogy at a time and only put out an interstitial film if it really has something to say. Don't feel like you have to do it because Lando is popular, that you have to do it because, hey, we haven't done Boba Fett in a while. Don't do it because we have to, like, oh, don't forget about Obi-Wan. You know, what I want them to do, what I want them to come away with is like, okay, here's our, if you're going to keep the series going, and they are going to keep the series going, work on whatever your next trilogy is and make sure that it's well plotted out and that the story works all the way through. And then if you get super fucking excited about something else, then make sure you put all the right resources to it instead of just kind of crapping one out just to stay on schedule. In other words, make the films because they need to be made, not because you're trying to put butts in seats. Yeah. Which I guess that's a lot to ask because, I mean, that's not the way business works.
I mean, we'll see how, you know, the current trilogy finishes up and I don't know. Then maybe on to another trilogy that nobody really asked for. We'll see. But Steve in chat says, and it kind of, I think he's kind of along the same vein of what you guys are both talking about. As much as I love Star Wars, I could do without them for 10 years or so. Now, maybe that's a long time, but So this notion of Star Wars fatigue is going around. What I wonder is, and I feel some of it, why isn't there the same thing as Marvel superhero fatigue? We get 2 to 3 movies a year from Marvel, right? In the superhero realm.
I mean, I'll tell you, I'm feeling that too. Like,
Oh, I am. Yeah.
I'm ready for those movies to go away for 10 years, and then we'll have another superhero renaissance someday. But I don't think it's just, the Star Wars films that have people feeling that way.
It's not. I think the big difference, I think the thing that's worked so well is, and I know I've made this point on the show before, they've yet to make an actually bad Marvel movie. They've made some that people liked more than others, but they've yet to make one. Like, this experiment of theirs has been remarkably successful. So even if, it's like, oh, there's a lot of these, you can still at least say, well, the next one's going to be good because they've all been good so far. Whereas Star Wars is exhausting because you do have the prequel trilogy, which is bad. And so you've already got that albatross. If you're like me, you thought Solo and Rogue One were bad. So that, like, of the new films, they're rolling like a 50-50, and that doesn't get you as excited for the next one. There are people who feel the opposite, that Rogue One was good and Last Jedi was bad. And so for them, they're also rolling a 50-50. So it's one of those things where, like, the exhaustion comes from with the expectation of knowing that I may not like this next thing. Also, let's face it, like, there hasn't been a lot of just, like, super exhausting conversation about any of the Marvel movies, or maybe even the Transformers movies, or anything like that. The dialogue that came out between Last Jedi and Solo around those two films,
oh man,
has been exhausting. And so I think, as much as anything, like, I almost don't mind the movies, but I dread the conversations that will happen. I dread the fact that Kelly Marie Tran got ran off of Instagram, and now I have to worry about, like, what female in episode 9 or in Lando the movie or whatever is going to get harassed by trolls on the internet. Like, what's up with this freaking fandom that gets their claws out even more so? And again, it's just a few people in the fandom. It's just a couple of assholes, but, like, that's exhausting too. And so that's part of why I'm less excited about Star Wars. I almost feel like maybe I'd be okay, wrap up this trilogy and then wait 10 years just so that this current age of like these trolls can grow up a little bit, and maybe we'll have a different generation of trolls. I don't know, but I don't know, just separating from these people from their opinions.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good idea. Wrap up the trilogy and then wait, and then kind of put it on ice for a little while. Maybe put out a animated TV mini series or something to kind of mix it up and kind of fill in those gaps but I think what they see is they see the companies like Marvel and whatever, and Illuminations with Minions or whatever, like, soaking up the money when they put these movies out. And that brings up another point. Don't make a $250 million Solo movie. That's that might help too. If they made a movie under $100 million for Solo, it might end up being a better movie, and the financial results, I think, might be a lot better too. So that's something they could consider. I don't necessarily agree with, the more money you throw at a movie, you're going to see that on the screen in terms of the quality of the movie. It might look a little sharper in its, there might be a few more whiz bang things going on, but story wise, structure wise, that doesn't have much to do with budget.
Yeah,
it's true.
You mentioned go ahead, Brad.
No, I was going to read a listener comment, but go ahead and dovetail. Well,
yeah. I was just going to say that, like, I think you mentioned, going back to the Marvel comparison, like, these films have differing budgets and granted, they're all blockbustery, but some of them are designed to certainly be bigger than others, and that's okay. And I think that that's what Star Wars should do a little bit more of. I'm not saying, like, they go, like, the next one is $225 million and then they make a $500,000 like super indie film or anything like that, but I think that you can make a smaller film and attract a smaller audience and still be profitable and tell a different type of story and still have that be a success story. Not every film has to be about, are we the #1 film of all time? We aren't, then we are a failure. And unfortunately, that's sort of the way these execs are looking at things. Like, if it's not that big, it's got to be bad.
Yeah. Well, especially when you think about like the setup for Solo, like you easily could have had Solo be like so much more budget friendly. I think like it could have been Han and Chewie like crashed on a planet together and they meet each other and Han frees them from the Empire and they escape. Oh wait, that's kind of happening in Solo, but like instead of spoilers for Solo incoming, getting on a ship and going out into the galaxy and traveling to different planets, it could have just been them like on the run on that planet, like with no resources, and it's just Han and Chewie like getting to know each other on this planet. Like how much less expensive would that have been compared to fucking Star Destroyers and giant black holes and everything else? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think we could talk a ton about this, but I think Sammy W from Denver makes a good point in the chat. He says, Star Wars is a commodity, but the quality will only get worse until they figure out what the market wants. I don't know what the market wants. I don't think they know what the market wants. How do you figure out what the market? Yeah, like how do you even crack that nut at this point?
Especially with, I think that the last two films have been, and probably all four of the new films in one way or the other has been remarkably divisive, and that's got to be hard to say. Like, okay, well, do we keep telling the story of Rey, or do we not? There's a large segment of people that don't want to hear Rey's story anymore. Not all of those are for great reasons, but that's still the feedback that that the studios are getting. And again, I don't know which other major studios of all of them are getting that same degree of pressure from all different sides. Like, Wonder Woman came out. Let's use DC. Let's jump off of Marvel and jump over to DC. Wonder Woman came out, and yeah, there were a couple of shitheads who were just like, you know, hey, like women are awful, and therefore you shouldn't go see Wonder Woman. But it was drowned in a sea of positivity. Black Panther, the exact same thing happened for people of color in a superhero movie. There were some shitheads out there who didn't like it not because of quality reasons or whatever, but because of the representation on screen. But their voices were drowned out by a sea of positivity. But the diversity that you get to see in the Star Wars universe isn't being lauded. The people that are like tearing it down, they have a much larger a platform, much louder microphone, whatever it is. There's more voices being like flooded in that direction, and there's less positivity to drown that out. So that's got to be hard as an executive to see, like, well, you know, we had more women in this last one. That worked for Wonder Woman. There was all the women in Black Panther. That worked for them. Why is it not working for us? That's got to be hard as a studio executive to stand your ground with those types of decisions. I think they should. But, you know, I totally get why they are trying to reassess the market right now. It's a tough market.
But the thing, I mean, it's not the main trilogy films that seem to be the source of a lot of this to some degree. Like, yeah, we have the trolls, and yes, we have the stupid people who want to tear the movies down because, God forbid, you know, women take a prominent role. But I mean, I don't think that's where the wave of like crushing, like, oh my God, more Star Wars movies is necessarily coming from. I think it's just oversaturation in general, I think, is just a thing. Like, you know, you eat too much fucking chocolate cake and you don't want chocolate cake anymore. You eat too much El Potosino in Tucson and you never want it again. Like, you know, there's I think a limit to how much of this it has happened. Real story, #truth. It's just one of those things where it's like, if you just keep like force feeding, even the person who's like the biggest Star Wars fan in the universe and loves everything eventually could get to a point where it's like, all right, bruh, like enough. Let's take a break for a little while. I got other shit to do. So, you know, I don't know that like there really is a formula that they can necessarily crack so much as maybe they just need to take a break, wait for people to want lots of more Star Wars movies again, and then capitalize on that.
Again, especially for this specific franchise. Like, I think they've had a harder time of it because of their fan reaction. And because they put out one in December and they put out one in May. And that was, you know, you can get away with doing that with a Marvel movie because that's about the time frame that people are ready for the next one because it's for whatever reason. But it didn't work for Star Wars, and they need to learn from that lesson. You know, they need to learn kind of what the right pacing is.
Well, I think we could talk about this
we could
many more hours.
Yeah,
but we do actually have two feature films to discuss. So we probably need to go ahead and cut the conversation there, and move on. Guys, are we all right leaving a galaxy far, far away and maybe coming back to something?
I went in
more...
thinking I wasn't going to do any talking, and I did as much talking as you guys did.
I'm okay with us.
Surprises the fuck out of me. So.
Let's do what Disney's doing, and let's shelve Star Wars for an indefinite period of time.
All right. Let's put Star Wars in the vault with Snow White and Peter
Penalty
Pan.
box.
Hey, we've got some new folks who've joined us in the chat. Jordan is with us. Hey, Jordan. Also, Bobby Miller. Hey, good to see you, Bobby Miller. I wanted to, and Jim, you had mentioned this in the chat too, but I just wanted to say it on air. Jim, you had given some congratulations to Darren from Canada. What were those congratulations all about? Fill us in.
Engagement. He got hitched. He got I guess committed to be married.
That's so awesome. Congratulations to Darren and Walt. We adore you guys. # love wins.
Oh, love you guys so much. That's so awesome.
All right. Well, guys, we are going to kick things off with our discussion of Incredibles 2, followed by our discussion of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. If you're listening live and you didn't see Incredibles 2 and you don't care about the Incredibles conversation, just come on back in about 25 minutes or so. We'll have our I almost said Star Wars. We'll have our Jurassic World discussion happening. Jordan says you three are looking really good. Thanks, Jordan. We appreciate that. Thank you. If you do want to hang around for the Incredibles discussion, we're going to talk about that movie spoiler-free for probably 10 minutes or so. We'll give you a fair warning when spoilers are fair game, not to worry. If you're listening on digital tape delay, you can use the handy-dandy time index in the show notes to skip ahead where appropriate, depending on what you want to hear. We won't be offended if you don't listen to one segment over another. As long as you listen, that's what we care about most. Mm-hmm. So glad to have you guys with us. All of that said, here we go, our discussion of Incredibles 2. All right, so it's a sequel, 14 years in the making. Will, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on just sort of the setup of Incredibles 2. Was this worth the 14-year wait for you? See it in theaters, skip it, you know the drill. What do you think?
Yeah, so Incredibles 2 is the latest Pixar film. As you mentioned, 14 years after the last one, created by writer, director, and animation extraordinaire, at least in terms of the filmmaking perspective, Brad Bird. I quite enjoyed the first Incredibles film, and I think, like a lot of people, have been waiting patiently or impatiently or whatever for Incredibles 2 to come out. The story is... So sometimes you pull up IMDb and they have like a really good description, and sometimes you pull it up and they have just the absolute worst. And I think this one somehow is both. The IMDb description says, Bob Parr, Mr. Incredible, is left to care for the kids while Helen, Elastigirl, is out saving the world. Okay, I don't know that necessarily tells the story of it, but it probably does tell the story with the same amount of enthusiasm that I had for the final product, because unfortunately, I didn't love this, and I am disappointed that I didn't love this. I felt like there were some moments of this film that work. I think there's some comedic bits with the baby Jack that I think are absolutely cool. I think the daughter has an interesting story arc, and just sort of her role and her powers and stuff like that, I think are always pretty interesting. So I kind of liked seeing her, and there's a couple of like side superheroes that show up for a bit that I thought were interesting and probably had about the right amount of screen time for what they needed. Unfortunately, I I didn't like the story of this. I didn't like the story arc of Mr. Incredible having to deal with being a kind of a stay-at-home dad, because it felt, for some reason, it felt very hollow the way they were trying to tell that story. The villain and the villain's motivations, I think, were interesting, but a little underbaked compared to what they were going for. The son has absolutely no story arc whatsoever in this movie. And that's a shame, because when you're telling essentially a Fantastic Four story where like it's like these superhero family members, everyone should have something going on, and he's just there for a couple of bits. This isn't a bad movie. It's just, when I think about like all of the really high quality Pixar movies, including The Incredibles, I feel like this one is missing some of the heart and some of the energy. It almost feels like they came back to this one not because they needed to, but because we've been asking for them to. I almost feel like if I had just had the first Incredibles movie and that was all of my memory, all of my experience with this franchise, it would have been enough. We got a second one. I didn't hate it. It's fine. It's whatever, but it is underwhelming. So that's me.
So here's your fucking second Incredibles movie.
Yeah.
You asked for it all these years. I'm tired of fucking listening to you. Here it is.
Yeah, take this movie and watch it, and you're going to like it. Remember those characters you like so much? They're back for like a scene.
Well, most of them.
All right. Mixed feelings for Will. Jim, how about you?
Well, I think I'm right there with you. Before I watched this movie a couple weekends ago, went and rewatched the first one because I had only seen it the one time in its release in 2004, and came back to it, and I was surprised how much I really liked the first one on a rewatch. It did get a little tedious for me toward the end. I thought, and spoilers for The Incredibles, the first one, a little bit. It got a little tedious for me, especially as the plot kicked in. There's a whole like jungle island scene, right? Or a sequence in that kind of toward the end of that movie. And then you think the movie's over. And then there's a whole nother like battle scene in the city with a giant robot. And you have to go through that. And it got a little tiresome, but I really liked the first movie. I liked the way the characters were introduced. And granted, I typically like to learn about characters. And so in these first movies, or call them origin stories for the Incredibles, if you want, it always comes across. I'm always more interested in that because I'm learning something new. I'm seeing something new. This movie definitely felt like a retread to some degree. This movie being Incredibles 2, by the way, it's not The Incredibles 2, it's Incredibles 2. The first one,
right?
It did feel like a retread. You're right, Will. I agree with you on just about everything you said. It felt like they had to hit all of the characters, give them their time. The whole role reversal of Mr. Incredible having to stay home and take care of the baby, and while Elastigirl is out being kind of the face of superheroes saving the planet. All great and good, but God, haven't we seen that role reversal stuff in like 1,000 movies? Maybe we haven't seen it in a superhero kind of movie, but come on, we've seen that before. The dad's going to be a fish out of water. He's not going to know how to do this. He's not going to know how to deal with moody teenagers or whatever. I mean, that just stuff felt like so like lazy writing to me almost. And like they needed a story for these characters. I wish I liked this movie better. I didn't. It had some really good moments. There's some good action set pieces toward the beginning. I actually like some of the sillier stuff that was in this movie between Jack and one of the neighborhood animals. I thought it was pretty funny, which actually felt like another movie too. It felt a little Ice Agey to me, but it was still fun. But here's what I'm going to say. I think fans probably should go see this movie. Look at the audience I saw it with. Loved the fuck out of this movie. Like, I think this is a crowd pleasing movie. I think people are going to get pretty much exactly what they expect. out of a second Incredibles movie, meaning more Incredibles, more Jack, more Edna, more, more of Elastigirl. So yeah, I was kind of middle of the road on this, and I'm going to suggest that people go see this. I just didn't really, it didn't do anything for me. It's kind of forgettable.
All right, so mixed reactions from Jim Pugliafico as well. All right. So coming in for me, I want to start with a question from the live chat. Clifton Cole says, was anyone really asking for another Incredibles movie? I can't speak for everybody, but I loved the first Incredibles movie, and I have wanted a sequel for so long. But I gave up on a sequel like 6 years after the first movie, I think. So when I heard that finally they were doing it, I was just kind of like, okay. But going into the movie, like it was an interesting experience for me, first of all, because I saw it by myself. Jim, you were traveling, you saw it on your own. So like here I come into the theater with my little popcorn and my soda, and there's a sea of like families with their kids all around. And then like I take my seat and I'm just like the weird guy by himself. And throughout the movie, it was interesting because I think this was a film that definitely pleased the kids, but kind of looking around, the adults who I think probably like me, some of them seemed in the same age group, were looking maybe forward to a sequel. I don't think they enjoyed it as much. They're just kind of sitting there like, and their kids are like, this is great. So I think it's great that this movie was so pleasing to kids. I think to fans of the first movie, your mileage is just going to vary. For me, it wasn't super great. I mean, Jim, you mentioned it earlier. It feels like kind of a retread of the first movie. I totally agree with that. Part of it is because this movie, I mean, from the trailers, the kids and everybody still look the same. So it's not like we've got a big time jump or anything. So at least tonally, I think that kind of explains some of these things. I just wish they had done something, I don't know, a little more different. Maybe they'd taken some risks with the story. The superheroed Mr. Mom versus, Elastigirl being the face of heroes thing didn't really work for me either. Except for it was really cool to see Elastigirl kind of put like front and center. I'm a big fan of the character. I liked her power set a lot. I think we got to see some really cool inventive ways that she uses her abilities in this film. But I mean, beyond that, it just, I don't know, didn't really do a whole ton. Also, I will say this movie didn't really tug on my heartstrings very much. And, we're kind of used to, I think, these Pixar movies kind of reaching in and grabbing your heart and doing funny things to it. And the short before the movie destroyed me in a good way. But this movie, it just didn't resonate, I guess. So, I mean, I would say, this could even be like a wait for rental, even if you're kind of unsure, if you're on the fence, you don't want to spend $40 on a date for two to go to the movies. Maybe wait for rental. But if you did love the first movie and you're thinking you want to see it, I mean, see it in big theaters while you can.
Yeah. And to that same question, like who was asking for this, to be honest, I've heard a lot from other people in, on social media, mostly. Whenever a movie would come out by Disney Pixar and it was so-so, some of the comments would be, why don't they just, fuck this movie? Why don't they just finally give us the second Incredibles movie? That movie was, the first one was fantastic. Give us that second Incredibles movie. So I think there was a cry for the second movie, and now we got it, and at least the three of us weren't so happy. I don't think, though, that we're fully in line, the three of us. Now, we are a small sample of moviegoers. I don't know if we fall in line with the general reception for this movie, which I think is overwhelmingly positive.
You know, there was enough of an outcry for this one, like you mentioned, like, you know, a movie trailer would come out and everyone would go, "Incredibles 2," like in the comments. That they actually had, and I don't know if they played this at every theater or where this was packaged, but like they had that PSA beforehand where the actors were like, they apologized for it taking this long to make a sequel. Did you guys see that one?
Yeah, we did.
Yes,
we did.
yeah.
Like, we're sorry. We're so sorry it took 14 years, but we promise you it's going to pay off. They sold us a bag of lies, but yeah. I think there are going to be some people that are going to like find it a little more positively, and I think that's because even taking all of our feedback together, I don't think any of us like hated this movie or think that it's like absolutely bad, just that it has some pretty rough issues to the point where it's just maybe rent it instead. And so there's some good here, and I think that if those good points hit exactly your buttons the right way, as they did some people, then you might have a much more positive time than me. But still, rent it. This is a wonderful, like, I need to watch something with my nephew who I've got to babysit this weekend type film on Redbox.
All right. Well, guys, how do we feel about making the jump to spoilers? We ready?
Sure. What happens to the Incredibles?
All right. Spoilers for Incredibles 2 are officially fair game. This is the part where I awkwardly ramble for a few moments to give you time to hit pause. If you're listening via digital tape delay, maybe hit mute. Coming back in 10 minutes, feel free. But we are going to spoil the crap out of Incredibles 2. And what better place to start, speaking of crap, than a super baby pooping in his diaper?
Yeah,
How was that?
I knew I was kind of turned off right at the beginning.
I hope so.
I think the first, as opposed to turned on, is so interesting. In terms of the movie and my enjoyment of the movie, well, come on. I knew I might be a little in trouble because the first kind of joke we get with Jack is, like a super poop or, or passing gas or whatever in his diaper, and everybody laughs. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong fucking movie. like I do not want this movie. And thankfully it wasn't, didn't get a lot more of that. But yeah, I think that's kind of set the tone for me, like set me a little back in my seat a little bit, a little disappointed.
When I think about the first Incredibles, I feel like it did something kind of special. It took this kind of Silver Age 1960s comic book story, and it told it in a way that was both familiar and new. We had not seen, there had been superhero movies out before, but not a ton. So we hadn't seen this type of story. And I've argued for a while that this is probably the best Fantastic Four movie that we've ever had. It was legitimately groundbreaking in a lot of ways. Fast forward to this film where the very first scene is them fighting a villain while the main hook of that story is each one is passing off the baby. And the thing is we've already seen that exact same opening, I'd argue done better, at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where everyone's passing Groot back and forth. So for me, that was already a bad sign. And I know that they couldn't have necessarily anticipated that. I mean, I guess they're both Disney, so maybe they could have. But I felt like it wasn't doing anything new. It had become the thing that it was, it had turned into the story that it was originally trying to, predict with the first one. I did like, you mentioned Jack versus the animal, the raccoon. I thought that was really cool. That was one of my favorite scenes because it was it was
funny.
Fun, it was interesting. If you had made that like a 3 to 5 minute short instead of like Olaf's Frozen Adventure, I think that's a much better use of that existing character in a short thing that the Minions does so much of.
Right. Might be because I'm such an animal lover that, I like seeing Jack gets an animal, and I'm kind of rooting for the animal, actually.
Well, sure, yeah.
For the raccoon. But yeah, it's interesting that Brad Bird chose to set The Incredibles in what appears to be like the 60s, I guess.
It's like 1962 or 1963. They actually hold up a newspaper at one point, and it's like written there. So, which is weird because it doesn't always look like the 60s, does it?
No, it's this weird anachronistic amalgam of time period stuff.
Yeah, but I got to thinking it must be because also I think the Iron Giant was set in kind of that, if I remember right. So I think Brad Bird probably has a very nostalgic bent to his stories, in terms of like bringing himself back to the wonder of his childhood era, being the 60s, and there's a lot to do there. But the problem is this movie is trying to get its one message, at least as brought by the pseudo bad guy in this movie, which is called Screen Slaver, that we're being taken over by screens, and we're a slave to the screen, and all that was kind of the message. But I mean, that stuff is even more prevalent today than it ever was in the 60s.
That's why it was a curious choice for me to have that be the setup for the villain, because I'm like, wait a second, hold on. Back then, when this movie seems to be set, yes, people are watching TV, but like in modern day, when people are walking around with screens in front of them on their phone or fucking built into their glasses, like, can you imagine how vile this villain would have really been if kind of given access to that technology in that time period?
It's interesting too, because like this character is, the villain's motivations are twofold. One, like everyone slaves to screens, but two, and we're in spoilers, so we can say this. Her main motivation, when you find out who she is, it's sort of unique, but or at least a unique twist.
Batman origin story.
So you've seen a lot of these like human villains, think like Lex Luthor, who are like, I need to tear down these gods. Superheroes are like a new god, and we need to tear them down. And this one instead is, her whole thing is superheroes infantilize us as human beings, which is an interesting argument, because that's one of the major arguments that people have against superhero movies right now, that these characters infantilize us as audiences. And I feel like they could have done something to make that story more interesting.
Yeah.
Also, the first motivation of being slave to screens is weird and awkward when you have this being projected on a giant screen and commercials for screens, and then I can pull up here and watch Pixar's Battle Heroes on my iPhone, and I can play as Jack as I'm fighting things. So like, it's a film where even the villain's motivations don't like nobody cares what the villain's motivations are, least of all like Disney marketing. And obviously you can't make a movie about like no screens and then just like not projected. Of course you got to do that. But I feel like a smarter version of this same script could have taken that and done something self-referential with it. Could have done something interesting with that superheroes infantilize a story that would have set this apart from the pack, instead of just making it a clone of all of the other superhero movies out right now.
Yeah. That's, I think, part of this movie throws a lot of ideas in there, but it doesn't really bring any of them like to any kind of meaningful solution. It kind of drops a lot of balls. Like, this movie picks up at the very end. I mean, this movie basically seamlessly ties the two movies together, because the beginning of this movie picks up like immediately after the first one ends. We have what's his name? The
Underminer. The
Underminer emerges at the end of the last movie in his subterranean drill machine, and then he wreaks havoc on the city at the beginning of this one, only to totally disappear. Like, he wasn't vanquished by the superheroes, I don't believe. I think he just kind of got away, right, in this movie. And
yeah, but I mean that's comics for you. Like,
is it?
I don't think he was meant to be the main villain of the movie.
Right.
Villains
No.
get away from superheroes all the time, right? And villains will often cause a social calamity, and the superhero has to choose between stopping the villain and like being the good guy to everybody else. So, I mean, that wasn't so much, I think, a misstep. Like, that was kind of a throwaway character. But I mean, I don't know. He's so over the top. Like, Jim, would you have preferred him to be like the main villain of the film, or
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, and maybe because I'm not a comics guy, I don't kind of get that storytelling, that way of storytelling where, like, at the end of one movie, they give you a huge cliffhanger with this seeming villain that's about to wreak havoc, and cause a lot of damage, and then at the beginning of the next movie, that exactly happens, and then, forget that. We're on to the real story. It seems a little clunky to me. But if that's the way comics work, then I will take your word for it.
It can be the way. Go ahead, Brad. You're right.
I was just going to say it's one of the most frustrating aspects of reading like the new like DC New 52 comics. Rebirth has gotten a lot better, but like at one point, like literally at the end of an issue of Superman, Doomsday fucking shows up, and you're like, oh my god, Doomsday, he killed Superman once upon a time. And then the next book, within like 2 pages, oh no, it was just a hologram of Doomsday, it wasn't really Doomsday, like here's someone else Superman's gonna fight. Like it's all fucking like misdirection and teasing sometimes.
It's kind of like those middle seasons of Game of Thrones, right? Where it's like, you'd watch an episode where it's like nothing. Oh my god, cliffhanger! And that was the end of your episode, just to get you hooked for the next one. Comics do that. And I think I will say, I'm going to defend this point a little bit, the Underminer, because I think that this character's role was not to be the major villain. It was to be the catalyst, to basically show, like, the first film was all about hey, superheroes are causing a bunch of liability, therefore they're getting sued, therefore they're going underground. And I think what this character was there to show more than anything is that's still a concern. And that's still, at least within this world, that's still a concern. And that catapults them with their funding and their positivity, like, they're rebranding things. So I think that's one of the positive things. I will say, in the movie, like, of the things that I really liked, I really enjoyed some of the supporting heroes that you see briefly. Not Frozone, who I thought he was way more interesting in the first one. I feel like he didn't have as much to do here. But I really liked, they had this character show up, Void. I think her name was like Karen or something like that.
Oh yeah, I call her Portal Girl because
the Portal Girl.
Yeah,
she was. I liked having a character who was sort of like, it was neat to see someone I look up to this other character, and now she looked up to Elastigirl. Now she's working with her. That was cool to see, even though it was like a small part of the story. It was fun. And whenever they got into the fight sequences, I feel like they really utilized their powers in interesting ways in the animated fight choreography. Which you can get away with animation, but like just like teleporting things around, or like not teleporting, but like doing portaling things around, and Elastigirl shooting through, like all of that was really neat and visually good stuff. I think that the aesthetics were there, and I think the characters were there. It's just that the narrative structure and the character arcs were not there. That's the thing that they really needed to maybe spend another 14 years working on.
All right, we have a whole nother movie to discuss, so I'm gonna ask one more question. Do we want an Incredibles 3?
It doesn't matter what we want, we're gonna get one, because this movie was pretty successful. You brought in enough money. I think the franchise, this movie wasn't terrible enough to make me say no, I don't want another one. I'd like to see them get another crack at maybe doing it in a more, in a better way, maybe telling a more interesting story. Maybe we'll get to see the Underminer become the villain of the third movie. Maybe that's what they're building to. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know how you wrap this up. We're definitely going to get another Incredibles movie. So I am Cliff in the chat says no. Cliff went on a screed in the chat about remakes, prequels, and sequels in the Disney and Pixar universe, and it's true. It's true. That's a whole nother conversation.
You want to know something funny?
Yeah.
So as Cliff said that, I was looking at a picture of Catherine Keener in the cast, who was also in Get Out. And so it immediately made me read his no as no.
Oh my gosh.
Now we're talking good movies again. What the hell?
That was a Get Out reference for anybody. You're like lost. Why are we going? No.
And if you didn't get that reference, go watch Get Out right now. It's a great movie.
It's so good. Oh my God.
Anyway. We just do another Get Out podcast.
Yes.
So for me, if Cars got 3 movies, I think I'm okay with Incredibles getting 3 movies.
And Cars turned things around somewhat in there.
One of the things I would, I wasn't like over the moon with the third Cars movie, but it's certainly like right-sided as best that franchise could. And when I think about like the trilogies that we've got so far, I think we really only have 2 from Pixar, and that's Cars and Toy Story. And both of those trilogies, not counting the fact that Toy Story, I think, has other films lined up, which, whatever. But at each of those final films did something very different. They did something gutsy with Cars telling the story from a different angle, and with Toy Story 3 having that amazingly what the fuck scene. That's what I want out of Incredibles 3. I want them to bring that same level of, this is our last movie, so let's do something different. And what that could be, I'm not talking killing these characters off. I remember this is still like a kid's story, but what if we fast forwarded like 5 to 10 years or so? Like I
would love that.
We take Jack is now like is like Dash's age. Violet's a young woman at this point. Dash is in high school. That's already some different stories to deal with. We can go back to the story of Mr. Incredible feeling his age like we saw in the first one, but now he's even older still. It's not just like, now I've got dad bod, but now I'm like actually getting up in years. I think that there's a lot of...
At least it would match Craig T. Nelson's voice, because he sounds 20 years older in this movie compared to the first movie.
He does. It's definitely a noticeable difference.
Holly Hunter too. Like, I mean, they all sounded way older than their characters. So give me an Incredibles 3, make it 5 years from now, like come out. So have this come out in 2023. And have the characters be 5 to 10 years older. Like that's the thing that I think they could do to close out the story and end it in an interesting way, like passing the torch to the next generation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We'll have to see what they decide to do. Well, guys, are we ready to talk cloned dinosaurs?
Yeah, spoilers.
That's not a spoiler.
Spoilers for 1993.
Spoilers for
yeah. Yeah, they've been cloned since the beginning.
Wow. All right. Well, guys, we're going to put a fork in Incredibles 2 and go ahead and shift gears and move on to our discussion of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Just to give you a heads up, if maybe you've skipped ahead via the time index in the show notes, we are going to talk about Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom spoiler free for probably 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up to spoilers. Don't worry, we'll give you fair warning before that happens. Okay, but stick with us. Here we go, our discussion of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I figure if I say Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom enough times, I'll stop saying Jurassic Park. We'll see if it works. But Jim, give us the very brief basic setup of this film and whether you think it's worth checking out in theaters, waiting for rental, skipping. Where do you come down?
Okay, I'm going to get right into it. So the last movie we talked about was 14 years since the previous iteration. This one's only been 3 years. So this one is Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Here's a synopsis. 3 years after the destruction of the Jurassic World theme park, Owen Grady and Claire Deering return to the island of Isla Nublar. No, Isla Nublar.
There you go, Isla Nublar. There you go.
I want to see that one. I want to see Isla Nebula, or like dinos in space.
Isla Nublar,
like Nebula from Guardians just shows up. She's like, "What up, bitches?"
Riding a T-Rex.
Right? Oh my god.
Well, as we'll get to, the name of the island doesn't matter anymore. To save the remaining dinosaurs from a volcano that's about to erupt and make and cause another extinction event. They soon encounter terrifying new breeds of gigantic dinosaurs while uncovering a conspiracy that threatens the entire planet. So there you go. That's the synopsis. This movie, of course, stars Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, BDH. All I can think of is the shoes when I think of her. But they're back. Jeff Goldblum is back, and we're going to talk about that. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh no, BD Wong is back in this movie. And that's not a spoiler because it's on it's in the cast list. So it's right. Is it BD Wong?
It is BD Wong. Although I think I disagree about that being a spoiler. I don't know. I was super surprised, but
yeah,
your spoiler mileage varies.
Yeah, I guess. So man, I really wanted to love this movie. I love, growing up as a kid, I love dinosaurs, everything about them. I want dinosaur movies to be like super interesting, a little bit scary, wondrous. And I think I got that a little bit in maybe the first 30 minutes of this movie. I really was digging it. I love the setup of this movie. There's, without getting into spoilers, there's a kind of a big action set piece. A lot of it is in the trailer. In the first 30 minutes of this movie, which I was really getting into. And then the movie kind of shifts gears. We'll talk about it in spoilers, but it really slowly lost me. And by the end of the movie, I was very disappointed in the kind of the overall movie experience. It did not hold up its promise that it set out with in the first part of the movie. So, man, I have to say that Jurassic World was fine. I kind of dug some of the new stuff we were seeing in Jurassic World, but in this movie, it's only about a third worth watching for me. The rest of it is not worth watching. So this one kind of falls into I can't recommend this movie.
All right. This is a not recommend from Jim. For me, I really, really love Jurassic World. I know you guys may have been a little more lukewarm about it than I was, but I was a huge fan of that movie. And so I was really excited for Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt to come back for this. When I heard that Jeff Goldblum was coming back, I was like, oh my God, Jeff Goldblum in another Jurassic movie. I'm so pumped.
Yes.
Yeah, I was super stoked. Yeah. No, it just didn't hold. I agree with you, Jim. I think the setup of this film, kind of the stuff that happens maybe in that first quarter, first third, was really good, really interesting, really neat setup. And then I think it went off the rails from there completely. And I want to talk for just a second about the lead up to this movie for me. I've mentioned before, I'm kind of a VR enthusiast, and Universal released these two Jurassic World VR experiences. It's called Jurassic World Blue. And basically you strap on your goggles and you follow Blue around the jungle as she's like hunting, and then the volcano like begins to erupt, and we know it's going to erupt from the trailer. And that experience like was so cool, and it was so awesome, and it was so much better than Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom was. So when your VR experience is better than your movie, at least for me, that's kind of a problem. Maybe that set my expectations a little too much. I don't know. But seeing this film, I liked seeing the dinosaurs again, but there's been this hanging question, like, what are you going to do with these dinosaurs now, right? Like, We had him in the original Jurassic Park movie. Then we had a couple sequels that weren't that great. In the second movie from that original set, dinosaurs fucking come to the mainland and wreak havoc in the city. You've got a T-Rex stomping around. Spoilers for that movie. But man, I felt like this was such a rehash of the bad elements of those original sequels. And that was a big disappointment for me, unfortunately. I got a whole lot more to say in spoilers, so I'm going to pass it off to Will. But I would say this is probably, one of those where, yeah, go see it in theaters, because seeing it on the giant screen with the great sound is awesome. But, I mean, temper your expectations maybe a little bit. Will, how about you?
Hey, let me temper those expectations even more. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is a bad movie.
There you go.
I did not care for this.
Next topic.
Done. No, there are some good things, and I want to make sure I call those things out here in a second. But the summary is, this is a franchise that has not known where to go since the first film made in 1993. I would even argue that this franchise is now batting at 20%. It's like, I was having this conversation with someone the other day. I haven't enjoyed Jurassic Park in 25 years. That's a fucking crazy thing to think. Like, for them to keep making these movies and for each one to just be so underwhelming. This one carries on with that, with the big thing that really, really hurt here was the script. There are so many bad script and character choices and characterizations all the way through this film. There are a set of recurring side characters that are just ridiculously poorly written. The two, it's probably a few more too, but like the two that stand out are just absolutely atrocious. They don't get a ton of screen time, but every second they are on screen is a waste. Chris Pine and Bryce Dallas Howard.
Chris Pratt.
Or Chris Pratt. Yeah, wrong Chris. Chris
Put
Pratt
Chris Pratt in this movie. I want to say that.
So to that point, someone was asking, I was watching a movie with a friend of the show, Austin King, the other night, and he was asking me about it, and he says, I thought that Chris Pratt didn't have any of his like natural charisma in the first Jurassic World. Is that present in this one? And I told him, like, I don't think so. Like, he doesn't bring the thing that he always brings to screen, and he has no chemistry with Bryce Dallas Howard. The two of them are just vehicles for moving the story forward. Now, what does work? I think J.A. Bayona, the director of this, he has a style that is very reminiscent of Spielberg's style. And I think there are some callbacks, not just the direct homages, although there's a lot of those, but just in terms of how the camera moves or just kind of the grandeur of specific scenes that I think works for the theme of Jurassic Park. I think that of all of the 5 films, this is the one that comes closest to how Spielberg directed the first one. But again, like, you can't prop like an adequate director on top of a bad script and expect that to turn into a good movie. Didn't care for the characters, didn't care for the script, hated parts of the ending. And I hated that this film also, a lot of these films have done this thing over and over and over again, where it's like, how do we get these characters back in the park? Because the park is what's popular. The park is what was happening in the first one. So Jurassic Park 2. Oh, there's another park. Oh, there's another park. There's another park. No, we're making a new park. Like, they keep doing that. And so this is the first one that's ballsy enough to try to shake that formula a little bit with some of the stuff that you see in the trailers. That said, and so I wanted to like this so much more. It had an original idea. It just executed so poorly upon that. This is a pass for me, and I hate saying that. I think I'm kind of with Steve. I maybe slightly prefer this to the last one, but only because of just some of the competent direction, and I feel like that is damning it with such such faint praise to say that at some parts it looked okay. But that's where I'm at. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, bad movie. Skip it, watch something else.
Oh
Yeah,
goodness.
it's really sad to see this. And it's an interesting thing that we talk about these movies being stuck on this island, and like how many stories can you tell, while you have dinosaurs and humans stuck on this island without it becoming too repetitive, right? So, but then you have the pull of, all right, we got to get the dinosaurs off the island to make this kind of a bigger story, because we're calling it Jurassic World. And as long as we stay on the island, it can't be a Jurassic World. It's a Jurassic Island. So, like, I don't know. It's got a built-in conflict with itself. To be honest, I'd rather see it stay on the island. I'd rather see interesting stories happen on the island, even if it's humanistic stories that happen on the island. They just seem to want to make it this grand thing. Like I heard it compared to a little bit to like the new Planet of the Apes series, and I think it's the same thing. Where the the apes are out and they're kind of taking over, and I think they want the same thing to happen here with dinosaurs. But so far, it's really bad. I mean, the other thing is, Will, you're right. There's a couple of characters in here it's terribly awful. In the chat, Cliff says the movie is humorless. Like Chris Pratt, I don't know if he has many. I mean, usually he has that sharp sense of humor. They really dulled it down in this movie. I think because I think they wanted the humor to come from these two younger new characters, and they could not pull it off. Their lines they had and their delivery were man, every time those characters were on the screen, I just wanted to like roll my eyes.
Brad, you had mentioned about the VR like being the best part of the movie for you. I encourage you all to look this up, because the best part of the movie for me, I saw this one at the Alamo Draft House here in Austin, and you guys have been, and some of our listeners may be aware that they do these like custom no talking, no texting PSAs beforehand. They've now done what is now my favorite of them of all of the ones they've ever done, and they got Jeff Goldblum to do it for this movie, and it is absolutely the best part of the movie was watching Jeff Goldblum do this super stilted and super weird like don't talk, don't text PSA. I'll find it and share it with you guys because it's on YouTube. But it is like it is so much better than this movie.
It's funny that you mentioned Jeff Goldblum, and we'll talk more about that in spoilers. But we kind of have a comment that maybe kind of sums up some feelings about this movie in the live chat. Sam from here in Tucson is actually quoting Jeff Goldblum's character from the first film when he says, they were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should, in reference to, did we need to make this other movie or not? And, gosh, that's hard to say because, Jim, to your point, this is Jurassic World, and there are some implications from that name. So obviously they were setting some stuff up in the first movie that I feel like they needed to make another movie to capitalize on. But like, man, do we want a third movie at this point?
I don't know. Like I said, I'm usually the forgiving one, and I don't know. Maybe there's an interesting story they could tell. I think the third one's going to be going back to the island. I think that's what it's going to be. I'm guessing that's what it's going to be. I hope that's what it's going to be, because that could be kind of interesting. If they and it's funny because let's get into spoilers.
I think we need to get into spoilers because I do want to say I am actually more excited for the third one, but only because I want to ask a question about the thing that you just said, because I had a different read.
All right, well then we're gonna go ahead and make spoilers happen. So if you haven't seen Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom yet, and you value your innocence with regards to knowing plot points, this is your time to step away. If you're listening live, maybe skip ahead using the time index on the show notes if you're listening via iTunes or Stitcher. But spoilers are totes fair game. We'll go for it.
So yeah, I guess my question back would be like, I don't think they're going back to the island, right? Because the island is covered in lava and done, but all of the dinosaurs are like running around like the main world, like the post-credit scene was like, what was it, like
Right.
the pterodactyls like overlooking, like, what was that, Las Vegas? And so
Yeah. Mhm.
that's what I think this film, for better or for worse, should have been. I think they basically took 2 films to figure out how to get dinosaurs in the real world. And I would just like to see if they had done the first film to sort of like make that happen and get that set up so that this one could have been dinosaurs in Manhattan, which is cheesy as fuck. But it's
where the fuck you gonna go with that? Like,
well, the thing is that I think the place that you can go with that, if you want to tell an interesting story, is, and I don't think they're gonna do this, but you set the next one like 20 years in the future, and you make it like almost like a post-apocalyptic, like what happens when these things have like completely fucked over the like just the human populations and all of that, to where like you have like groups of like people huddled together trying to stave off T-Rexes and stuff like that. That's such a departure from what the series is, but at the same time, I think that it's a much more compelling way of doing the story as opposed to just Chris Pratt on a motorcycle and sometimes he's good with dinos.
Well, Jim had mentioned earlier the Planet of the Apes comparison, and spoilers for the new Planet of the Apes movies. You've been warned. But like at the end of that, like first movie or whatever, where like the disease breaks out and humans like start dying off, we get this like montagey map thing where like the line denoting the disease like is going like across the world map. I almost thought after the dinos get out into the wide world during the credits, we were going to have like a montagey like map of like dinos invading all these different places and taking
the red lines going out.
yeah
all over.
And I was like, that would, like going into a third movie, like that would be cool. But then the problem is, of course, then it's too Planet of the Apesy. So I don't know. That's kind of a tough one. I feel like this movie isn't all bad, though. I mean, there were some positive things that I feel like are worth kind of mentioning. I thought they did a really great job with just some of the dinosaur like movement. I felt like in Jurassic World, there were certain moments where like the dinosaurs were a little too ragdolly when they were like being thrown around or moving, especially that fight at the end with the Indominus Rex versus the T-Rex. Here, the gravity and the physics of the dinosaurs at least felt a little better to me. Also, I want to give a shout out to that super, super sad, bittersweet setup they did, where like we call back to the first movie when Grant and Dr. Settler like see the big brachiosaur and the music is like da 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 da, and they're like, and it's like this magical thing.
Beautiful scene, yeah,
so beautiful, right? And then we get this beautiful brachiosaur going as like the lava is like coming behind it and fire engulfs it and it dies. Like that part killed me a little bit. Like that was really good, big emotional response.
That was the end of the movie for me. That was the end of the movie for me, pretty much.
I mean, remarkably well directed shot. Like,
yeah. And like awesome. I said, I like that whole beginning sequence up to that point. I thought it was a very well done set piece. And then they turn into like a night at the dinosaur museum, because that's kind of that's what the rest of the movie was. Like, whose idea was it to take these awesome creatures and put them in like this claustrophobic, first of all, they're in a hold of a ship, then they're in this like stuffy mansion somewhere, right? The whole movie, 2/3 of the movie takes place in a fucking mansion and in a laboratory under the mansion. So I just hated that whole part of the movie. But yeah, that one scene was the only time I felt anything in the entire movie, and that's kind of sad.
And they tried to make us feel something with the little girl character that shows up, and
the clone little girl. Whoa!
And I want to start by saying that idea isn't necessarily a bad one if you do something better with the script. And I think that this film was so close to doing something interesting with the script, because this franchise has always been about stitching together something new based on the things from the past. And we got to see that with the Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, where not only are we recreating those things, but we're actually creating new life. We're creating the Indominus Rex and the Indoraptor and the 8-year-old girl by using like this DNA and this clone and putting things together, and they're moving things forward. And that's almost like what the franchise has done. This film here stitched itself together with these interesting shots from previous films. There is something there, but it was so poorly done. Specifically, by the time you start to realize that the little girl's a clone, it's probably about 5 minutes before, like, there's this shot where you obviously see it on a picture. Then they have to have another character come out and actually verbalize it to the screen, which just sucks up dead, airtime, because we already knew at that point. And then the characters are just kind of like, oh yeah, okay. And then that's it. That is it. Right. It's done for just like a quick throwaway comment that has no real stakes. You can maybe argue that the action that the girl takes at the very end of the movie maybe is based on that, but that's flimsy justification at best. You cloned a human being in this movie and you did nothing with it. That has to be a crime. Like, how do I bring charges against this movie for doing that?
Well, I think you hit on what they were trying to do with it, right? She ends up being the one, we're in spoilers, whatever, fuck it. She's the one that like opens the big door because the gas is going to kill all the dinos trapped in the mansion lab. She opens the door so that life can find a way, and they all get out, right? And everyone turns to look at her like, what the fuck did you just do? And she's like, they're alive. They deserve to live too. Just like me, because I'm a spoiled little brat clone. Like, I think it sets up the justification for why she takes that action, but I think the execution leading up to that moment was just crummy. Like, if they had done that a little more smartly, tied that in a little better, I think that action at the end would have been miles better.
And the film doesn't even know how they want us to feel about this, because all of the characters who bring the dinosaurs to the mainland and want to take them and do different things with them, they're villains. These are evil people because they want to release these dinosaurs or use them as weapons. People are going to die because of these villains, so when they get their comeuppance, it's a good thing. Yet when this little girl releases the dinosaurs, spoiler alert for like the next Jurassic World movie, a lot of people are going to die. Like, the pterodactyls aren't just going to like be hanging out in Las Vegas. They're going to be swooping down and grabbing people off their slot
off the strip.
Like,
yeah.
There's, when Blue is overlooking that neighborhood in that one shot at the end, we're not supposed to maybe we're supposed to go like, oh wow, this is where she belongs. I'm thinking like, Blue's about to go eat some children. Like, they're going to be murdered families right now, and it's because of that girl. But the film wants us to think of her as a humanitarian, whereas the villains who did the exact same thing she did were assholes who got their comeuppance.
Yeah, the girl was not handled very well in the story. But even worse than that, and we alluded to this a little bit, there were two characters, Franklin Webb and Zia Rodriguez in the movie, played by Justice Smith and Daniela Pineda.
What a nasty woman.
Whoa.
Oh, that line.
Whoa. That line was crazy. Oh my God.
Man, I could not stand one of those characters. Like, Daniela Pineda, okay, she was kind of annoying, a little bit, look how smart I am. I'm smarter than all of you other adults. I'm a paleo veterinarian, but I've never seen a dinosaur. You know what I mean?
Like, oh my God. Like,
do
doctors get to be doctors having never seen a patient in person?
I still do not know. I would have to watch the movie. Why was the other kid even along on the trip?
Because
any idea?
So it's stupid because they need him to. Once they get there, they find a door is locked and he has to like.
Oh, he's the computer guy.
But this is like a paramilitary like organization. Are you telling me that their whole plan of getting Claire there with the biometrics, they were just going to go like, gosh, hope we don't come across a locked door. Doopy-doo. Like, they planned out this thing so intricately. Like, why did they not have a computer guy? Why did they have to bring this computer guy? And why did the film not try to justify that? At least throw it, like, give me a throwaway line. If we'd seen Claire say beforehand, like, she has wanted her whole life to see dinosaurs. This is what she's passionate about. I've been talking to him about needing to see more of the world. I'm 100% not going unless I bring these two people along with me. If we'd even seen something like that, I could have hand waved it off. But they didn't even give me enough to do that.
Even just adjust his backstory a little bit. Like, have him, even if he didn't work on the original island on the security system or whatever, maybe he's like a consultant or something. Maybe he's been studying that original system. Like, there's got to be a reason that the 25-year-old hacker guy, like, is a better option than, like, professional grade military hackers. You know what I mean? So
and then to turn him into just a screaming, like, frightened, like, caricature character for probably 2/3 of the movie was when he wasn't banging on a keyboard and opening doors, his character was absolutely useless. Right. And that whole trope of like, oh yeah, we need to open the door in sector 3, but it's but it's behind a firewall. No problem.
I'll double hat
it. Yeah. So it's funny. Steve in the chat says, bring back the nerd girl from the first movie, Lex. That immediately brought to mind this line when she's like trying to like hack into the computer. She's like, it's a Unix system. I know this. And my thought was like, yeah, you know what? They were using Apple computers. It's Unix based. Like, sure, that could totally work. Why not?
They did another thing with him that I thought was the film tried to make you feel specific ways about characters that didn't always feel justified. For example, that particular character, we're supposed to have seen him as this kind of squirrely fish out of water who is just way over his head from the moment that he gets on the helicopter or whatever, like, or the truck, I guess, and they're getting ready to go out there. Like, we know that this is not his like his forte. But the way they show it to us is you've got all of these people sitting around and he starts putting bug spray on. And he offers it to everyone else. And everyone else looks at him like he's got a dick growing from his forehead. And all I was thinking was like, actually, yeah, that's like, it's kind of dumb that they're not. You're telling me that there's not some, like, I'm not saying like crazy, like mutant ones, but like, there's probably some pretty shitty bugs, like, hanging around Isla Nublar. Like, put on some off. Why not? Like, that's not an unreasonable or like nerdy thing to do, to like not want to get like malaria. Like, and the fact that everyone else looked at him like he was just like making this completely unreasonable request shows me that the film went out of its way to try to make us hate this character.
But if we're being fair, there's a volcano like belching all kinds of smoke and gas, and we know that smoke is a mosquito deterrent, so he didn't need that off after all.
You're absolutely right. That's the justification that the movie.
Can we talk about another
Jeff Goldblum? We got to talk about that before we wrap up.
All right, sure. Well, basically, Jeff Goldblum is in this movie 2, maybe 3 scenes, and they're all the same. Him sitting in a chair in front of a panel of trying to, I don't know, decide the fate of dinosaurs in the future. And he might have 3 or 4 lines in each scene, and that is it. Like, completely wasted. He's not involved in any of the plot of the movie at all. It's almost like they weren't planning on putting him in the movie, and they had everything shot. And then at the end, they're like, oh, he became available. Oh shit. All right. Well, let's make these boardroom scenes and just put him in a chair and have him spout Jeff Goldblumisms, and we'll put that in the movie and we'll call it good.
He spends as much time in the trailer as he spends in the actual film. Like, you almost hear every single one of his lines in the trailer. He is in the film for just that first and that last scene, and it's just to rattle off a couple of sentences. It's maybe if I'm being generous, it's maybe 3 minutes of the entire runtime. I think actually it's probably less when you kind of like actually I spend how much time he's either talking or seen. That's almost, again, like when I say criminal, like I feel like the marketing of this really plays him up to be a bigger part of this film, and it almost feels like a sort of like a misdirect, like a shell game type thing. Like, oh, you thought you were gonna see Jeff Goldblum, surprise, you got the Indoraptor.
Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess the fault of the failure of this movie doesn't necessarily lie on the director. I just think it's a badly written, badly conceived, badly written, and badly scripted movie. And a director pretty much has to direct around that. Colin Trevorrow is one of the writers on here. I don't know where to place the blame, but it's just kind of misdirected in terms of where this series is going. Again, this is a movie that's doing pretty well at the box office, so my guess is we may see another Jurassic World movie. All I can do is hope that they can right the ship. Again, we're talking about the same thing that we did with The Incredibles, although The Incredibles I think is probably a more successful follow-up to its original than this one is. It's just I just hope they can find a way to make a third one more interesting and well executed.
I want them to burn it to the ground. Like, I want them to take the story. Like, if this is where they've got, I don't want them to do like a convenient reset. They found another island. It's 2 years later and they've gotten all of the dinosaurs back in a pen, this time in Wyoming. And now there's a new park or whatever. Like, I don't want any of that. Like, if this film is going to say, now there's dinosaurs out in the real world, the only logical conclusion is, okay, that's going to have some impact. That's going to fuck up a lot of things, cause a lot of death, cause a lot of changes to societal structures. Let's see that. Let's see them close out this trilogy. Let's let this be the last of all of the Jurassic World, Jurassic Park, whatever movies. They get 6, and this is the last one, and it's just 20 years later, and it just says, hey, the world is fucked because of all of those things that started all of those years ago with Hammond and all of these guys. Like, because of the things they did, this is where we're at.
Right. Make it a cautionary tale again. The problem is all of these dinosaurs have chips implanted in them that they were able to use to track them on the island. I'm sure they'll find a way to use the chips again and track them in the US and round up all the dinos again. But I think it would be much more awesome if for whatever reason their magic tech didn't work anymore and the dinosaurs finally fucking take over. And I want to see like Dr. Sattler come back and do the whole like, man, created dinosaurs eat man, women inherit the earth. I want to see her in like a fucking survivor buff holding a spear, like hunting dinosaurs at the end of the next movie.
And you know who I want her to be teamed up with? And he can even be like the kind of the squirrely, obnoxious one that dies halfway through the movie or whatever. You know that fucking kid from the very first scene of Jurassic Park who Grant scares with the raptor claw?
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Imagine if now he's just like gets jumped on by Blue and disemboweled midway through. Like, give me like if you're gonna do all this stuff, give me some real fucking fan service. Like, go all in.
Bring back Laura Dern and whoever that guy is.
Yeah, and that's good advice. If you are making a movie, put Laura Dern in it.
Yeah. That'll fix everything.
That's our advice.
Well, guys, we've gotten a little long in the tooth, as so happens when we combine a Star Wars discussion, an Incredibles discussion, and Jurassic Park. Jim, did you have any final thoughts? Will and I have kind of been monopolizing the convo a little bit. Was there anything else you wanted to get out about Jurassic World before we wrap?
No, not really. Like my final word was I just hope they can do something better with the third movie when we get it, or the next Jurassic World movie, if and when we get it.
We'll have to see. All right. Well, guys, as we kind of tie everything up in a pretty bow, unfortunately, conversation finds a way to continue, and that happens online. If folks want to chit chat with you about Jurassic World, Incredibles 2, or anything else, really, Jim, where can they find you online?
Find me on Twitter at JJP Out West. That's all one word, JJP Out West. You can also find me under my name, Jim Pugliafico, on Facebook.
All right, excellent. Will, how about you?
Hey, hit me up on Twitter at Whatever Cove. I'm on Facebook, William Lindus, Lindus. Just send me a message first so I know that you found me through the show. I'm also on Letterboxd. That's letterboxd with a D at the end.com. Look for me as William Lindus there as well. You can see all of the films that I've watched this year and for the last 6 years at this point. I've had this account for a while. So yeah, be friends with me there as well. I'd love to share movie thoughts with you and hear your movie thoughts as well.
All right. And you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one that likely has Bear, Chub, Chaser, whatever other silly label you can think of friends in common with you. You can also add me on Twitter at iBradPro. It's on the screen for you if you're watching the video version of the podcast. And that's it for this week. A big shout out to all of the folks who joined us in the live chat. I won't do the romper room thing because I know Jim devolves into fits of squealing laughter every time I do it. But great to see everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out. And we will see y'all next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.